Hey everyone, welcome. I'm so excited to have you here, closing out the final day of the Our Future conference, getting this regenerative recharge towards a regenerative future that we're all envisioning. I'm really grateful that you're here with me, being part of this movement, being a part of this event, being part of creating this future together. I'm so excited for the upcoming weekend, all these awesome presenters. And I am so excited to be here presenting and hopefully inspiring some action and collaboration with you today. My talk is titled From Seed to Liberation: AI, Open Source, and the Rise of Empowered Farmer Communities. My name is Caleb DeLue. I'm the founder and director at Cocktail of Cultivars nonprofit, among many other things. Here we have, at this time where we're alive, an unprecedented number of issues pressing on us and an unprecedented number of opportunities at the same time. This is really a unique and powerful situation, and most of these struggles between these opportunities and these forces coming down on us involve control and competition. And so I'm here to say, let's break the shackles of control and competition and reclaim farming. I hope you join me on a journey from seed to liberation, where technology and collaboration empower farmer communities to build a just and sustainable future together. A little bit about myself before we get into it. I have been a gardener and a lover of plants, immersed myself in nature my whole life. I grew up right next to a creek running through our property, interconnecting us on both sides to the temperate rainforest in the Pacific Northwest United States. I have always felt this interconnection and this sense of an ecosystem, our interconnection to the other elements of nature. I also have had some, what I would say are miraculous healing events in my own life from some disabilities using plant medicines. And I've also gotten into amateur breeding, small scale farming, natural farming production, and really a deep passion and love of mine is rejuvenating soil fertility, seeing the results that that has on the whole ecosystem. I also am involved in conservation, and I got my bachelor's degree in the combination of legal studies and botany. So a really interesting field, and my focus there is liberation, humanization, and this, again, this ecosystem approach that I'm going to tell you more about here. I also experienced, here in this other picture, building a green energy technology company. I'm a fifth generation inventor, and I grew up in a technology rich household. We had a lot of technology around because my father and a lot of my family work in computer technology and have a lot of invention history there. So, continuing in my own twist in that legacy, I founded this green energy technology, and I was part of a team that patented the Agni fusion reactor as well as some other related technologies. And as those took off, as those became recognized on certain levels, we experienced some of these control and competition effects that I alluded to a moment ago. And this resulted in a 5-year lawsuit, tens of millions of dollars involved, and intellectual property really at the core of it, involving some competitors, some hostile interests coming in and actually taking over the business and stripping us, the original founders, of our innovation. So I have that experience in the trenches, really relevant to what I'm going to talk to, and these next steps I've had in my journey and in this journey that I hope you join me on is merging a lot of those experiences. I'm going to talk about a community-based solutions for changes in this ecosystem. This ecosystem being not just the plant life, not just an ecosystem that we might tend on a farm or in our gardens, or on a conservation level across the globe, but rather the ecosystem that we're a part of, this interconnected environment of the social ecosystem. And so, first, we're going to start with the state of agribusiness, the impact on agriculture and farming. And I hope that you'll stick with me as we go through some of the harder elements of this and some of the more technical background. And I promise that we're going to be getting to some inspiration out of this. You know, this journey brings us to a beautiful place of inspiration. And first, unfortunately, we start with where we're at, the mess of the agribusiness. We're faced with these unprecedented problems as farmers, as gardeners, as tenders of the land, and lovers of nature and of plants. We live in a world where business conglomerates have roll hammer style, smash and grabbed so many operations. This conglomerate energy that these business entities have has devoured whole sectors. And we face these big ag monopolies as well as exploitative business practices that are leveraged against all of us. Food insecurity, and then, of course, environmental degradation from over farming, from irresponsible use of chemicals, and from climate change as well. And so this is a visualization of a large portion of this ecosystem I'm talking about. So this is the seed industry structure from 96 to 2018, and it's much the same today, although in my looking into it, it's gotten a little bit more interconnected and conglomerized, unfortunately. We have there Bayer in the center. You can see the tendrils spreading out. One of the big ones is Monsanto, one of these big interconnected central hubs, and the arrow direction involves control. It involves a centralized spreading of control, and so all of these are kind of appendages of the more centralized chemical companies. We have seed companies coming out of those, and then of course some other companies in green. You can see that there's some tracing down through from Bayer and Monsanto all the way down into KWS and Mikado, and then that even links it down to that conglomerate structure of ChemChina and Corteva. So we have all of these elements that the business operations have really taken over and interconnected. And one of the factors that is so critical in creating this ecosystem is the intellectual property system. The intellectual property system, we hear lots of phrases about, there's lots of advertising in order to convince us to opt in to a traditional intellectual property system. So some things that we hear pretty often, you may have heard intellectual property law drives innovation, or that patents drive invention. And a lot of times this is interpreted or twisted to mean that you would drive it, as in to fuel it, right? But when we think about a car, we think about other applications where we're driving. There is a distinct difference between the driving and the fueling, right? And so, more accurately, when they talk about intellectual property driving innovation, it's much more about control of the trajectory of the car and ultimately the outcomes that I talked about a moment ago, that I highlighted, and that I'll continue to highlight. So a little bit of historical background about this ecosystem. Just like when we are looking at a plot of land where we're going to do some sort of permaculture design, we're going to do some sort of gardening process, we might, in our methodologies, look back at the history as much as we can access it, or test in order to acquire some historical knowledge. And in the same way, I think it's important to look at the roots of intellectual property and how they formed this social ecosystem. The conception of intellectual property was actually in the 1400s in Venice. The first patent law was made, and it was a big part of state technological aggregation of technology into the war machine. There was this original conception where the Venetian government would give a prohibitionary stamp where they would enforce prohibition against anyone else using an invention if that inventor granted the government the right to use that technology and ultimately involve it in the war machine and in their international economic interests. So the ownership of ideas was really first came about at this time when we think of indigenous knowledge systems, when we think of time immemorial humans coming together and having societies. We had hundreds of thousands of years without this idea that ideas were owned once they were spread to other people. And then even more modernly, genetics and life itself. This really intensified in 2001 and the years around there. There were a number of high-profile cases, including in the Supreme Court. We had GEM Ag Supply v. Pioneer Hybrid International, some seed companies facing off on that high level, and they were able to convince the courts to impose patent law and intellectual property law on life itself, on first plant seeds, but now ultimately even human genetics and all sorts of living genetic material. They established the patent pathway. They established the plant varietal protection pathway with the USDA, copyrights, and then also use licenses. And these are four separate approaches to intellectual property within the conventional colonial intellectual property system. They all four involve fighting in court to extreme monetary and stress expense. And that's exactly what we've seen. We've seen Monsanto most famously, but many other groups swoop in, rolling hammer, smash and grab against mom and pop operations and small operators, anyone who stood in their way, having heirloom seeds that could challenge their monopolistic interests, breeding unique and interesting varietals, or simply keeping community interest in the grassroots level alive. And there were a number of campaigns by these different business groups in order to knock out as many of these small farmers as they could. Here's a New York Times article talking about Supreme Court support of Monsanto in a seed replication case against a small farmer. And there were over 400 heirloom seed savers and small U.S. farmers who were sued out of business by Monsanto without any material evidence. A great example is the Neil Young Seeding Fear documentary, and I encourage people to check that out. It's not a long watch, and I really think that it helps to show firsthand some families and some people that have been through this struggle. And we have some statistics that really hammer home the intensity of this. A large portion of the market, almost 80% of new companies have faced an intellectual property lawsuit, and the majority of those are by patent trolls. We also know from the American Intellectual Property Law Association that the average cost of patent litigation is $2.8 million. And businesses do not have a right to self-representation in court, and so that means that you have to hire a lawyer if you have a business, including a farm business or a family business, and you cannot show up to court to defend that business yourself. You have to pay these exhaustive legal fees in order to be involved, or you simply lose by default. Most of the time, on this grassroots level, we don't have $2.8 million in a war chest waiting around to defend ourselves from claims that have no evidence. But if we can't, and as my experience with green energy innovation showed me firsthand, we are ran into bankruptcy, and our innovations, our creations, our plants, our farms, our whole lives are swept up into the conglomerate by these businesses when they drive us into bankruptcy via the court systems, and they drive us into having all of our assets bought up by them opportunistically or assigned to them to settle court debts. However, I'm a big fan of this quote by Buckminster Fuller. He said, "You never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete." And I think there's a lot to that. I think that that's a very powerful approach. And I think that we as a community have this opportunity during this unprecedented time to make a new model, a new reality, which makes the existing reality obsolete, which makes this control and competition complex obsolete. And that model looks like growing an empowered farmer community globally. That's a lot of what we have set out at Cultivars nonprofit to do. 4 years ago, when we founded this nonprofit, we made it our mission to protect, publish, and preserve vulnerable plants using copyleft research and education. And we are simply one in many organizations that are working towards similar goals. We really encourage everyone who's a similar part of this movement to join. We're an all-volunteer organization at this point in time, and we have some really great support in terms of those volunteers. We are continually building that support in order to achieve this mission, and I'm really excited to demonstrate some of the tools that we've created and some of the ways that we're hoping we can democratize access to knowledge and help create a collaborative, open approach that helps us do away with control and competition and instead move into a collaborative ecosystem framework. In the open source software world, we have these concepts of the cathedral and the bazaar. The cathedral is a centrally and quietly crafted structure. Individuals within it may not know what other individuals are doing. They might not know how many individuals are involved or even who's entirely in charge. There's secret projects, and you don't always know the layout. You may not know how many secret passageways or basements there are, and this really helps to empower the elites, empower the most powerful in order to do their own agenda in the dark. We have on the opposite spectrum, but often right next to each other, we have the bazaar, the marketplace, this chaotic, babbling open source development where the stalls are open, the fruit's abundant, and we have this conversation, this collaboration, and people are ultimately knowing each other, talking, and creating this rich, beautiful ecosystem that helps spread power amongst people. There's the ability for people to meet in the open, there's the ability for the natural spread of information, and there's people bringing their abundance into this system next to each other, sharing, laughing, building community, and ultimately keeping life rich and alive. And we take great inspiration from Peter Kropotkin's work. He's an evolutionist and a studier of what factors involve themselves in the evolutionary process. He wrote some great books, including Mutual Aid, A Factor of Evolution, where he said, quote, "Ask nature, who are the fittest, those who are continually at war with each other, or those who support one another? We at once see that those animals which acquire habits of mutual aid are undoubtedly the fittest." And that really encapsulates a lot of our philosophy here. We have this approach like a school of fish, like a school of tuna here. we have this approach like mycelium or like a rhizome. We come together as an ecosystem, and we're able to outpace privatized, competitive, closed systems. When we have this open interaction, this open collaboration, it will always outpace a privatized, centralized, secretive group. And if we can create this larger scale organization, this ecosystem consciousness, on this higher plane of consciousness and understanding that naturally develops through a collaboration, we ultimately have the power. We have the power to create the future that we want to see, and this ecosystem that we want to see, and this regenerative approach that we want to see to creating the future. And the future of farming that I envision is a decentralized, collaborative, and regenerative food system. That means we're all working together, not all of us with everyone else, but in this interconnected web of association. That harkens back to indigenous knowledge systems, even the creation of corn itself. When we look at how Mesoamerican people for thousands of years took this grass, teosinte, and they spread it among each other. They spread it across the land to many different peoples. And those people developed it. They developed it and they shared it again. And they shared it again and spread it again. And over time, through this progressive, decentralized process, we arrived at corn, at maize. And this abundant, beautiful crop that has supported our societies so much for so long. This symbiotic relationship with the plant, with each other, this sharing, this decentralized nature is ultimately part of the regenerative approach. It's both regenerative to our human social ecosystem, to our hearts, our spirits, our minds. It's also regenerative to the land. It's regenerative to the plants themselves, to the way that that breeding and evolution continues. And it goes hand in hand with all these other amazing regenerative technologies, techniques, methodologies, and ideas that we're downloading from this conference this weekend. So I'm really calling in this decentralized, collaborative, regenerative food system, and I hope you're calling it in with me. One of the great innovators in this way of thinking is a pair called Deleuze and Guattari, and they are thinkers about the rhizome of social change. They came up with this concept in those words, right? And they acknowledge and attribute this idea to a much older lineage of indigenous people, as I mentioned, working across the globe, sharing and collaborating and building this technology, building the artistry of farming itself. And the concept, the rhizome of social change, involves forming this rhizome, increasing our territory by deterritorialization, by instead of demarking specific gates, specific walls, specific fences, we dissolve all that and we allow the interconnected nature of the rhizome, the mycelial nature, to spread and continue to spread throughout the land. And we extend the line of flight from that community across the world, allowing us to develop this ecosystem in a decentralized way, like we were just talking about. This rhizome of social change is something that we can nurture in our own lives, in our relationships with each other, in our relationship with the land. And just like ginger or any other rhizomal plant, just like the mycelial nature of mushrooms, when a part is removed, we're able to fill that in, we're able to build that back up. When there's an aspect of it which is damaged, the whole community's interconnection is able to help repair that. If there's a threat from the outside, there's this collaborative, interconnected strength and tensegrity that allows us to weather that storm, that allows us to ultimately bring together our resources and fend off that threat. And being decentralized, there's no one place that can be removed that kills the rest. we have that durability, that anti-fragility, and that adaptability. Felice Guattari and Gilles Deleuze had these 6 principles for the rhizome of social change. We have first, connection. The rhizome must continue to create these interconnections, these connections that are, in our case, between people, in the physical rhizome itself. They might be physical exchange of nutrients or of communication, and ultimately we're replicating that interconnection structure in our human relationships. There's number 2, multiplicity, where there's ultimately the multiplicity of people, the multiplicity of parts. There's lots of different redundancies. So when we have, one central piece over here that connects to its other elements of the ecosystem, we have another one over here, right? And another one here, and another one here, and another one here. And we just continue that building multiplicity, that interconnection. And then we have the map of those connections, right? The number 3, the cartography, where that map shows the pathways, the modifications, the ways that it can be entered, the way that connections can come in, the way that resources can flow through the system. We also have that number 4, the heterogeneity, which is that diversity element. I like to think of it as biodiversity in this case, and we are able to have all of these different actors within the system with their own specialty, their own knowledge, all interconnecting, all building to this beautiful biodiverse synergy. Just like when we are co-cropping different plants, just like in silvopasture or in agroforestry, right? We have this multiplicity, right? We have this cartography, the places, the placement, right? We have the interconnection, the way that they actually support each other. We have the diversity, the different pieces. So number 5, we also have the ability for it to get broken down and reform. And so that's very similar to when we take a chunk of a mycelium, or we take a chunk of a root of a rhizome, we take a chunk of a ginger, and we can clone it. We can move it to another location. It can build out a new structure. And even if those locations happen to be close enough, or you put them next to each other, the old one and the new one, they'll interconnect. And we'll have this rupture and yet new and old lines intersecting. Then, finally, we have the decalcomania, as they call it. And I know that's a tricky word, decalcomania. But it's really just that we are not calcifying into any specific structure, that we are continually transforming. It allows the flexibility, it allows the movement, it allows the rhizome to put out roots and radicals and sprouts, and ultimately to transform itself adaptively with the environment. In our work at Copyleft Cultivars, taking that ecosystem approach, building this rhizome of social change, being a part of the rhizome of social change with you, we are involving 3 elements in our strategies. And these weave together in a beautiful way that I hope to bring you into today. We have first our legal hacking, we have the restructuring of our strategy within an intellectual property system so that we can achieve this collaborative, integrated, protected ecosystem approach. We have the genetics and the plants themselves, the center of our artistry and our science, the center of our work and interconnection, and ultimately why we have this passion in the first place. And then this is complemented finally with the third element of computer technology and artificial intelligence, democratizing access to information and democratizing access to the tools that people need to ultimately create this rhizome of social change. I'll walk you through a little bit of one of our implementations of this strategy. So this is the use license and bag tag that's used by Semenis in many of their seed packagings. So here we have a seed packet which has their bag tag, and I can't read it, even in person. Looking at it very close, I cannot really read it. And I think uh, even the finest eyes among our audience will have trouble discerning the terms, and yet they are legally enforced. There have been many lawsuits and many litigations about this type of seed bag tag, and they are legally valid as contract law. A great group called the Open Source Seed Initiative, who's been a key supporter of ours at Cultivars since before our founding, and I really want to give credit to them as the innovators for this idea of flipping the copyright law for bag tags on its head in order to establish open freedom. And they made this bag tag. And while this is a great step in the right direction, it's a great encouragement. OSSI themselves, Open Source Seed Initiative, as well as many other groups, openly talk about how this is not enforceable in the way that they've put it together, and it lacks any way to interconnect a community in a resilient structure. It assures freedom of use, and it clarifies that when you receive these seeds, you have that freedom. You don't have to worry about the other terms from the previous slide. However, it only really goes that far. So we decided to take this a step further, and in an open collaboration with over 600 people around the world, including farmers, including professional breeders, people at universities, professors, we involved experts from different elements of permaculture and people involved in the legal system for seeds. We've included lawyers that are in the field of liberative law, where they have flipped their traditional role as lawyers into serving all people in the public good. And we've included our founders, as well as many other people who just really wanted to get involved and contribute to this. And we all collaborated. We hosted this collaboration through the nonprofit, and we produced this bag tag text here. So this is the first of its kind legally enforceable copyleft bag tag for plants. And this is built in such a way that ultimately it can be used like contract law. The first lines of it being that you accept these freedom affirming terms by opening the seed pack. And then, of course, telling you immediately right off the bat that you're free to use these seeds in any way you want, as long as you don't restrict others' use of these seeds or their progeny, so the plants that come out of them or future seeds that are bred from those plants. And then the terms also include this third feature where any genetic data, any nucleotide scanning data is going to be sent back from the person who tests that. If it is from seeds or plants bearing this label, it gets sent to our nonprofit, and we publish it openly and freely for anyone in the community to view on copyleftcultivars.com. We also launched this collaboration with Pro Arts Common, an awesome nonprofit in the Bay Area that is involved in uplifting artist collaborations and the commons. And we're creating this community. It's a community tree project for first hemp growers, as we've gained really the most feedback and interest from hemp growers, and then as other cultivators of other crops request this or have interest in it, we're going to be expanding this beyond. Right now, we're collecting these hemp cultivar leaves from any plants which are grown from those seeds that are protected under the Freedom Bag Tag. And if you produce or grow seeds with that bag tag on it, you can go ahead and scan pictures of the leaves and send it to us. You can just go ahead and take the leaf and flatten it onto a piece of white paper or similar, and then we're going to be building all these leaves together and making a visual demonstration, this tree that our community has come together and bred together, showing this diversity, this multiplicity, this beautiful, creative, and productive force that we all share together. This is also deeply rooted in the right to repair philosophy. So this has been really in the public discourse for the last decade and even longer, but it's largely centered around tractors, around physical machinery technology on the farm. As we face things like climate change, as we face globalization and the changing of our earth, changing of our practices towards more regenerative farming practices, we also acknowledge and are met with the reality that this right to repair should extend to plants, should extend to the seeds themselves and the genetic code, which is the ultimate blueprint for the artistry of that plant. It's ultimately something that we should have this right to repair with. And if we have this right to repair with our seeds, with our plants, as assured by tools like the Freedom Bag Tag, then we can be adaptive. We can reproduce these seeds, see what works in our specific environment, in our specific climate, in our specific grow techniques, and continue to adapt that and repair any issues that we experience on our farm with the plants themselves and with the genetics of those plants themselves. This allows democratized access to fine-tuning all of these different plants. It also allows for individual artistry and your love of your plants and your land on where you cultivate to shine through in your work more fully. And it also allows this rhizomal element to continue to interconnect, to continue to spread and yet have biodiversity in its various aspects, in its various places. Another project that we're putting together that exemplifies this rhizomal social change and this interconnected ecosystem approach is the open source gene trait galaxies. So we're working on several different galaxies, which is what you're seeing here on the screen, where there are individual dots representing individual plants, and then the lines between them show an association. In this case, this is genealogy, and the red dot is the most important or the most popular, so to speak, ancestor on the map. And so this allows us to see this interconnection and development. It also allows us to put traits and genetics and location, specific farmers, give you credit for your work publicly, and we can interconnect all these pieces of information in order to find some amazing discoveries together. This sort of thing is usually restricted to huge agriculture companies and universities. And while we are partnering with some universities in this work, we have this commitment in the very licensing itself for how this is being produced and released to make sure that this stays accessible for people and to make sure that this is a public good. And so if we are all working together, putting our information together in this system where it's protected from privatization, where it's protected from any sort of hijacking, and it's assured as this interconnected public good, then this information together helps us develop amazing understandings, amazing results. One of the things that allows us to do is called GWAS, or genome-wide association studies. And these genome-wide association studies involve scanning the markers across many plants, markers in their genetics, and the connection between that and the traits. And we can show, for example, an association with particular disease. We can show an association with particular productivity. And that collaborative, open approach to GWAS will allow us all to have access to customizing and ultimately a deeper understanding and symbiosis with our plants and our environment. There's some great tools coming out too, and this is where artificial intelligence, and specifically open source artificial intelligence, is really powerful, really important for helping everyone have access to this understanding and these tools and this knowledge. So AlphaFold made great headlines. It was technology by Google, and unfortunately it's closed source, which means that it's not openly accessible to people around the world. And AlphaFold 2 by Google was able to take the protein folding problem, which is the question of how do these genetics become this specific shape of protein? That specific shape then clicks together with other proteins, interacts with other proteins produced by the genetics, and that is how the genetics go into activity, building the organism, building the plants, and ultimately give rise to the specific traits and features of those plants. And this program, AlphaFold 2, was able to take what was a 30-year timeline for someone who was trained, PhD, in this field of protein folding. They were able to take that timeline down to between 30 seconds and 30 minutes. And ESM Fold took that a step further. Luckily, ESM Fold, both with higher success and more wide-ranging applicability, ESM Fold is open source through the community called Hugging Face. Yeah, that named after that emoji, the Hugging Face. And that's open source. And so you can download this technology. I could download it. We can put it into this nonprofit and apply it to these galaxies. They have here what you can see really exemplifies this rhizomal network of information, this interconnected galaxy of the proteins that ESM Fold has put together. And this reveals an understanding of genomics that we've never seen before. It starts to give us an ability to look at the genetics of our individual plants that we're growing, the seeds, the seedlings, or any growth stage, take that and use it like a Sears stone to ultimately see how those codes in the genetic that we've crafted as artists through our breeding work, how those develop into the shapes of the proteins, and ultimately how those proteins fit together to form the traits of the plants that we know and love. And so this is where this interconnected nature and this AI technology bring us back to our roots, to the place where we ultimately came from, nature itself, and indigenous knowledge. And it brings us to ancient wisdom meeting modern technology, the synergy of indigenous knowledge and AI tools. We have our third big project that we're starting to release right now and giving early access to on our Patreon. We have the AI-powered natural farming fertilizer assistant. This is a chatbot where you can go on to it from any internet-enabled device. And you can talk to this chatbot, giving it your location, generally speaking, what issues you're facing, what plants you're growing, size of the crop space, acreage or square footage, that sort of thing. and any other factors that you think might be relevant. And it takes that information and it will create a customized, localized set of recipes and plans for addressing those problems and for giving your plants the nutrition that they need in a customized and specific to your situation way. It uses free ingredients whenever possible and invasive plants whenever possible so that you're going out and breaking your breaking your attachment to fertilizer, breaking your dependency on chemical fertilizer, and giving you resilient access to these resources that you need to make these recipes. It also reduces our dependency on chemical fertilizers through giving this knowledge to anyone with access to a computer or a phone. And we're working right now fine-tuning its ability to analyze and optimize soil health based on testing. We're working also on a couple other exciting features to continue to expand its use into addressing pests, into addressing specific work conditions, and ultimately, in all ways, democratizing access to farming knowledge globally. So let me give you a little example. So I'm going to tell it that we're in Washington State. We have 1/8 of an acre of heirloom corn, some brassicas, and some peppers. And it immediately starts helping us out. In Washington State, I know that we have lots of nettles, comfrey, and these other ingredients. Being near the coast, there's ground fish, and especially near the bay, that's often very available. It starts showing us some Jadam and some Vrikshayurveda recipes. Vrikshayurveda is an offshoot of Ayurveda in India and some ancient farming technology. We also have some Korean natural farming that it's working in, and it starts to give you precise bioaccumulator data. We worked with the Open Nutrient Project and many other information sources in order to train this and supply this model with the information that it needs. And this is the only reliable and accurate, agronomically correct results producing AI available today. Here we have those bioaccumulator data, some instructions, and some alternatives. And it ends with this beautiful words of encouragement. It talks about how your journey into natural farming is inspiring and important. And we're going to show you this other feature now where we're able to translate. So we're going to ask it, please translate that into Thai. And this allows it to be democratized beyond simple English speakers to regions where even different scripts are used, different lettering. So you can see here, it starts translating this into a Thai script, and we're able to see the different headings. We ultimately want to make this available for free to marginalized people all over the world, anywhere that this can really help. We know that in parts of Southeast Asia and in India that fertilizer debt is one of the leading causes of suicide, and famine as well as difficulty with pulling people out of poverty can be addressed with this technology. So we're really excited with the implications of this. When you sign up on our Patreon for early access, you will gain access to the most cutting edge development. Every time we have a new development, a new release, you're going to go ahead and have access to the newest version. And then we're going to go ahead and cycle that forward so that the version that our beta testers were using, that our Patreon subscribers were using, that becomes publicly accessible, supported by those users. those Patreon supporters, it becomes accessible to everyone around the world openly and publicly, and the newest, most cutting edge developed version becomes available for those Patreon subscribers. We hope to continue rolling this out, and we also hope to one day get grant coverage so that we can make this as open as possible. We're all about democratizing access to information, democratizing access to farming knowledge, and ultimately abolishing poverty itself. And I think that this technology, this access to understanding, can help in eliminating poverty itself. It could be an important piece of this puzzle. And here simply continues to give us that translation. And next, I'm going to go ahead and give you another demonstration in another location, this time in Chao Phraya Basin, Thailand, a family rice farm looking for an alternative to fertilize their rice crop, which is 16 rai in size, about 6 1/3 acres. And immediately, again, it's using specific localized ingredients that are accessible. Some of these are very freely available in this region, and it takes these, uses the bioaccumulator data, and formulates specific recipes using our recipe training, and then allows the user to see these recipes, walks them through how to use them, and gives this beautiful breakdown in table format. We're working on having it displayed, in a beautiful table, but ultimately gives you the access to the core information and then implementing how to use it. It also talks about rotating crops. It also talks about alternative recipes. And one of the really beautiful things about this is that you can conversationally go back and forth with it. You can refine your question. You can continue by saying, I don't have access to that ingredient, and it can continue to adapt that. And you can say, I don't have understanding of how to make a specific ingredient-based recipe, and it can ultimately take that and instruct you the specifics of how to make that recipe. And we're continually developing this. Our Patreon supporters are making this possible. And so one of the things that, given the funding support, we hope to accomplish is also democratizing access to this by including voice talk option and conversational back and forth with audio, where you can click a button, talk to it, click submit, feeds out the answer, and you can have it read off to you as well. So here's an example of that.
Short introduction. Greetings. It's commendable that you're seeking sustainable alternatives to conventional fertilizers for your rice farm in the Chao Phraya Basin, Thailand. Let's explore some natural farming techniques that can help reduce costs and reliance on commercial fertilizers. Nutritional needs of the user's crops. Rice crops generally require a balanced supply of nitrogen N, phosphorus P, and potassium K, with a particular emphasis on nitrogen for vegetative growth and phosphorus for root development.
We also plan to include multimodality, which is the mixing of senses, so images, audio, and text, as well as any other sensory data we can get, agronomic testing data, these sorts of things, and integrating this understanding into the abilities of this bot. We're going to eventually have it include the ability to upload photos. And ultimately, this is the only AI system that we're currently aware of that has the ability to crunch these numbers, to create these recipes in a localized way where the numbers are reliably correct and usable in the field, and where we can really start to access results that people can rely on for their livelihood, for their crops, for their day-to-day interactions with their farms. We've been beta testing this for a little while, and here's some amazing farmer feedback that we've gotten. One farmer said, "An amazing marriage of timeless wisdom and modern innovation." Another one of our beta testers said, quote, "This is the future of natural farming right here." A third gave us this feedback, quote, "This is way nicer than looking through hundreds of search results, paper books, and spreadsheet pages, and then trying to fit it all together." And finally, my favorite to hear is simply, quote, "I'm already seeing great results." And that's really what we want to see. So, bringing us home here at the end, we have this quote from Keith Aoki. He's a researcher who looked at the open source software ecosystem and the open source breeding ecosystem. And he put forward this analysis: free seeds, not free beer, participatory plant breeding, open source seeds, and acknowledging user innovation in agriculture, that speaks on a lot of this potential for our world of farming to ultimately be transformed in this beautiful way we're talking about. He said, quote, "Farmers' rights advocates have the potential to evolve into what the open source software movement has become: a commons-based peer production network that facilitates the sharing of plant genetic information and biotechnological tools." And that's exactly what we hope to create with this rhizome of social change together. So I hope that you are ready to continue this mission together. I hope that you've enjoyed this journey today and that it inspires action in your life, in your specific field, in your specific part of the world. And I hope that you'll join the movement both by supporting copyleft cultivars in whatever way you feel inspired to do. You can go ahead and join our volunteer team. You can join our Patreon and support us that way. You can join any other sort of outreach or continue to spread the word about our organization and this movement in general. I also hope that you'll contribute your knowledge openly to all of the community. I hope that you will join our Genetic Galaxy projects, start to use the Freedom bag tag on your work. And I invite you, if you feel inspired, to start your own organization and continue this mission. Start your own initiatives, start your own advocacy in this realm, because it's going to take us all to have this ecosystem approach in creating a regenerative future. It's going to take us all to create this rhizome of social change. It's going to take that mycelial approach with many, many of us sending out our tendrils, doing the work, transforming the detritus layer into rich fertility. And so I hope that you'll contribute your knowledge and help build a liberated food future today and tomorrow and inward to the future. We have our Patreon again, which you can gain access to the newest AI-powered natural farming fertilizer assistant, the most cutting-edge edition. You'll get the first rollout. You'll also get some previews of our Galaxy projects as they become available, and we're just going to go ahead and include your insights, your feedback directly into development. If you want to support us financially in any other way, go ahead and reach out. We, again, also welcome volunteers. We're an all-volunteer organization at this point, and really all of those funds that we've fundraised to date have gone back into making this mission a reality and supplying these tools to the world and to the public good. I hope that you'll keep in touch. I really do want to hear from you, and I really do appreciate that you're a part of this movement. You can go ahead and check us out at copyleftcultivars.com, copyleftcultivars@gmail.com if you want to reach out and have a little back and forth email conversation. We have an Instagram at copyleftcultivars. I also personally have an Instagram for some of my growing and amateur breeding, especially related to hemp. That's at Soulshine Growing. And then the Discord invite is on those Instagram bios, or you can just reach out to us, and we're happy to bring you into that open collaboration world. We have our Patreon, as I mentioned, and then if you want to reach out to me personally, my name again is Caleb DeLu. I'm available on LinkedIn or any of these ways, and I'm happy to connect with you and talk with you. Thank you for being a part of this. Thank you to the organizers of the Our Future conference, Matt Powers, and everybody who's involved in making this happen. Thank you to all of the people who, dating back to time immemorial, dating back through our uncountable ancestors, have supported us, have created the relationships with the land, the relationships with the plants that we thrive and continue building this future through. We stand on the shoulders of giants, as is said, and we are so grateful for that. So I just want to give that big shout out from the center of my heart for all of you being involved in this movement, everyone who's come before us, all this involvement in building this conference, in building this movement, and in ultimately building this regenerative future, this regenerative recharge. I'm feeling awesome about it. I'm super excited about these upcoming days of speakers and presenters. And again, thanks for being with me. Much love. Have a great day and a great night and a great weekend.